Alright, well good afternoon everyone and welcome back to another live stream. My name's Jake, I'm one of the reptile keepers here. And as always on a Wednesday we are going to be feeding Elvis the croc. Now Elvis is our large resident male saltwater crocodile. Saltwater crocs are one of about 27 or so species of crocodilian found right throughout the world. We have two others here at the park. We have a lot of American alligators, which you would have seen if you visited the park before, and we also have the smaller Australian species, which is the Johnston's River or freshwater crocodile. Now back to the saltwater croc, this is the one we're talking about today. They are the world's largest living species of reptile. A really big male, and Elvis, here's a male here. A really big one though, could get to 6 meters in length and weigh anywhere up to 1,000 kilos. Now Elvis isn't quite that, but it goes without saying he is an incredibly large, incredibly dangerous male saltwater croc. He comes in at about 4.6 meters and close to 500 kilos. Certainly nothing to be sneezed at. And at that size, more than capable of causing a human fatality. Now in saying that, crocodilians as a whole are a very, very easy group to avoid. They spend the majority of their time in the water. That is where they're dangerous. And particularly for a saltwater crocodile, they're dangerous at the water's edge. In the wild, Elvis would be feeding on something like a medium to large sized mammal. So a kangaroo, wallaby, even up to a water buffalo. That is the size of an animal that they could take down. Of course, as humans, no worries whatsoever. We could easily be taken, dragged into the water by any saltwater croc in excess of about 3 meters in length. I mentioned before, Elvis is about 4.6. Now Zach's going to start to move Elvis around the pond a bit, and we do that using vibrations. This is something that a crocodile will instinctually move toward, because out in the wild, of course, a prey animal, I mentioned those, kangaroo, wallaby, when they come down to the water's edge, they are creating vibrations at the water's edge, and that is what would allow a crocodilian to hone in on that potential food source. Now, of course, Zach hopefully is not going to become a food source here this afternoon, but he uses that same principle, tapping the water, creating vibrations, exciting the crocodile. Now, we're going to bring him around here, and then we'll swim him back around. And as he moves beneath the surface, you'll notice he doesn't make a single ripple or disturbance as he does so. It's incredible. I mentioned before, he's 450 kilos. Not a single disturbance. All that water movement you see there is from Zach and that stick. Elvis does not create a single one. And that is due to those lumps and bumps that line the back and the tail. Those are known as osteoderms or scutes. They're little pieces of bone underneath each scale. They basically create that little raise along the back, and they create currents and countercurrents beneath the surface, which quite literally cancel each other out, allowing even very large male saltwater crocs, as we see here, to move just inches below the surface without a single disturbance. Now today we've got a little bit of the advantage. We can see Elvis. We're keeping him in nice crystal clear water. But you can imagine if we were in Darwin, the top end, North Queensland, even parts of Southeast Asia where you find saltwater crocs, they are not living in water like this. Where Elvis would be living is in a dark, murky river system, typically, where you would have no idea that a big male saltwater croc is sitting right there. And by the time you do figure that out, it is way too late. Even as he cracks the surface there, you'll notice he only does so with his eyes, his ears, and his nasal disc. Now, the reason he does that, and the reason his head is the way it is because he can only, he only needs to expose about 2% of his entire body mass, and he can do pretty well everything he needs to. Only pops up a tiny little bit, he can remain fairly well concealed, and yeah, he can still do everything he needs to. He can hear, see, and smell, as I mentioned. Now, Zach's going to grab the camera in just a moment, because today we are going to bring you guys nice and close into the action as we feed Elvis today. We've got a little bit of kangaroo, we've got one reasonably small bit, and then a much larger bit which we'll feed him to finish off. And when he crunches that bit, you're going to hear the bone in that leg quite literally snapping. So it's going to be pretty incredible, especially being nice and close to the action. Alright, now just like Zach was before, I'm going to begin to create those vibrations at the water's edge. And I'm going to bring Elvis right in here. Of course, quite reminiscent now, right on the water's edge of something coming down and taking a drink. Alright, come on Elvis. Now what I'm really watching is those back legs and that tail. That is the driving force behind the saltwater croc. That is what will allow him to propel himself up and out of the water. like that. He's grabbed that bit of food there, he swallowed it, and now he's creeping a little bit forward here. I don't like that. He's wondering where the rest is. Now, that was nice and short and sweet, and this is pretty well an example of how they would snag something out in the bush. As I mentioned, something coming down 50 kilos or less, they're going to kill it instantly as they grab it. Anything larger than that, they'll drag into the water and very simply drown. He could hold his breath for maybe 3 to 4 hours in a single go. A mammal, of course, particularly one that's just been grabbed by a croc, is going to struggle to hit a minute. Now, I'm going to catch my breath here for just a moment. We'll bring him around over to this side if we can. And then we're going to give him that big bony bit. I know that's the part we've all been waiting for. And we also need to save face a little bit on that piece because that was too quick. Come on up. Now you'll notice he's not hiding anymore. He's got his head up on top, we can see him, he's confident, he knows what's going on. The game's up now and he's just acting very, very confident right now. Now what a lot of people don't realise about saltwater crocodiles like Elvis is right throughout the 1940s and 50s, 60s, they were prolifically hunted for the skin trade. A lot of them were shot, particularly the big males like Elvis, for the skin trade, and their population did decline by over 95%. In 1978, there was just 3,000 saltwater crocs left in northern Australia. That's it, 3,000. Now, unfortunately, by 1973, they had been made a protected species. In all 3 states they occur in, that's Queensland, the Northern Territory, and WA. And since then, their numbers have made it quite a comeback. These days, we see about 250,000 saltwater crocs right throughout the northern parts of the country. They do also range throughout much of Southeast Asia as well. So they're not strictly an Australian species. They don't belong to us. They do have an extremely large range. Alright, come on on. Now I'd say this bit here is going to probably excite him a fair bit. I'm going to try and lift his head up a bit so you can hear those jaws come together. Alright. Now, hopefully you readjust that. Oh, hear that. Now, if we're talking bone density and size, that leg there is probably pretty similar to a human leg. So you can imagine, if that was yours, what he'd be doing. Oh, hear that. And now it's down. A big burp to finish off. And a little surprise as well. We'll wait for him to go back in, which he's going to do ever so slowly. Perfect example of how a big saltwater croc is very large and cumbersome and sluggish on land. If you're past 5-6 metres away from the water's edge, there's no way a saltwater croc can get to you. It's only at that water's edge that they are extremely dangerous. Now I've got here in my hand a very tiny example of an Elvis tooth. Crocs are just like sharks in that they'll basically drop and replace their teeth throughout their life. Elvis does it reasonably frequently. He's still in the prime of his life. We estimate he's about 50, 55. So he's dropping his teeth and he's replacing them. As they get really old, just like people, they start to lose their teeth and they don't grow back, so you end up all gummy, looking pretty average. But right now, Elvis is in the prime of his life. As I mentioned, he's a spectacular croc. We hope you enjoyed that feed here this afternoon. Bit of bone crunching action, and I think we're going to finish up on a nice close shot of Elvis himself. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed that, and we will see you next time feeding Elvis. Thank you, guys.